everybody. Welcome to Got the Fire, where we talk to and celebrate people that are doing cool things in and for Indianapolis. I'm Duncan Olney, the host of the show, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Maggie Daniels. She is the founder of Try It Tiny, after she left her real job at the end of, as she puts it, at the end of 2016, where she was heading up Kite Realty's investor relations and strategy units. So welcome, Maggie. So happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us, to start with, what is Try It Tiny and what does it do?
So Try It Tiny is comprised really of two core competencies, the first of which is effectively an Airbnb for both tiny house and private land rentals. So folks that are interested or just amused by tiny homes can try it, and folks that own one can find places to park. The second aspect of the business is really an events-based. So we take our own inventory to national events, such as the Indianapolis 500 or music festivals, where lodging is either limited or unavailable.
Got it. And you're an aspiring minimalist. Mm-hmm. You did the 30-day challenge.
Yes.
Right? How did this aspiration motivate you to start this company?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that probably living in Manhattan right after undergrad sort of forced some of that on me, because I went from having what now I would call an abundance of space to a small studio apartment for quite some time. And then it's something that I've just tried to take with me, and I found that the more I simplify, the happier I am. And so really it's been a complementary aspect with the tiny home business.
Got it. And when it comes to tiny homes, I think most of us, including all of you, we have some understanding of tiny homes. And but there is a certain situational community that comes around, happens when tiny home people are together, either with their homes because they're traveling or just because they know that they're tiny home owners. What's that like?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it ranges depending on the set of circumstances. So tiny homes are traditionally, or most often, built on wheels. So you can think of them as a traditional pull-behind camper, except that aesthetically it looks like a home. And so one of the first things I realized when I towed for the very first time across the country was that everyone was very interested in what was behind my vehicle. So immediately the looks that you get when you have this massive structure behind you, because they're generally much taller than a camper, really gets the shock and awe effect from people. And certainly every time we would stop at a gas station or a restaurant, folks would come up and say, ask if they could come inside. So that's kind of an interesting, small example of the community you're talking about. And then fast forward to the Indianapolis 500 last year, folks were staying for 4 days in the glamping area in what we call the tiny house village. And within the first day, one of the gentlemen that was staying in the home quickly became coined the mayor of the tiny house village. And so you would go to that area in the evening and he would be cooking meat for everyone. Everyone would be bringing him, to his grill all of their food, and they all ate together and had a great time. So I think that's a really exciting way to see it in person too.
Yeah, because that just isn't natural. That's around your values, and you sort of are more accepting of people or more interested in people because they have similar values.
Exactly. I think that the industry and the movement is really rooted in a more sustainable, minimalist, cognizant of your carbon footprint. Those values it's very rooted in that. And so I think when you get a group of people together who are either trying to learn more about that, or maybe that's a value that's always been core to them, they tend to kind of band together, and it creates a really nice environment.
And so you went through this 30-day challenge, which, for those of you that don't know what it is, you got to start with one thing on the first day, two on the second day. You got to get rid of them that you don't need or don't bring you joy. What was that like going through that? And can the average Duncan get into the tiny home movement?
So really good question.
Sorry, Joe.
So I would say that, so the 30-day challenge is from the Minimalists. It's two men that have their own podcasts, and they go around and talk about it and how important it is. And the first time I tried to do it, candidly, I was a little chicken. So I did take, I found one thing I was going to get rid of the first day, 2 new things the second day, all the way up to 30, and I put them in boxes in my garage. just in case I found maybe I wanted to get something back out. And then after going 30 days and never pulling something out of the box, I realized it really wasn't adding much value to my life. And so I've since done that about 4 times now. So I think that that's a really good way to leg into that lifestyle.
That's got to be like hundreds of things per month, though, right?
It's a lot.
I can't run my Indian math brain at the moment, but that's got to be like 300-400 things.
Yes, it is. And no, you shouldn't just do one sock at a time or
Right,
something.
right,
you know,
right,
it's,
right.
it's
No
not
cheating.
really getting the spirit of
Yeah.
it. But for the average Duncan, as your phrase, I think that people can live tiny in any size home. What it's really about is living without excess and trying to refocus what's important to us into experiences, relationships, family, friends, whoever that is for you. And I think that that has nothing to do with the square footage of your living structure.
Yeah. I was reading, I think it was a couple days ago, and someone said that if you have more bedrooms than inhabitants, you got to start asking those questions, which I'm guilty of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I call my cat an inhabitant too, so I'm not so guilty. I'm only slightly guilty. So.
Well, and your plants that you were mentioning.
Oh yes, I do
maybe
have.
they need a room.
Yes, they do need a room. I have, I think, 10 plants, and I hear that I'm somewhat of an example to the male community, generally speaking, that I kept those plants alive.
And it's tricky to take them from outside environment and bring them inside and keep them alive. So that's impressive.
Now, speaking of which, you are also a gardener. I'm not a gardener. I'm a keep a few plants alive guy. You're a gardener.
I try to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have aspirations for that in the future?
Yeah, I would love to have a full-blown, fully sustainable homestead someday.
So the greenhouse and...
The whole works, yeah. I dabbled with cattle. I'll probably try that again. I do have chickens. Then I've got a little nice piece of property in the rural part of the north side of Indianapolis in Zionsville. And so I first started my garden, though, very small, and then slowly grow. And this last year kind of took it a little bit bigger.
So, I want to say 2 things. One is thank you for all that you're doing in this space, and you're an entrepreneur in a sexy space. That's really cool. But as an entrepreneur, I also know that there's the other side of entrepreneurship that people don't see, and it's not all...
Not so sexy.
Yeah, it's not so sexy, yeah. So what's that like, as an entrepreneur?
It is, without a doubt, the hardest thing I've ever done. It is something that should not be taken lightly by someone who's looking to step in. It shouldn't be discouraged, but it's very difficult, and you have to embrace new skills, a new style of life that a lot of folks, maybe, and myself included, underappreciated, entering into it. So as a quick example, first tiny house I got was actually constructed in Idaho. And I had never towed before. In fact, I had just got my first pickup truck, which I never previously had driven, and went out with my best friend, and we were going to tow the tiny house from Idaho to Portland for a conference, and then Portland all the way home. And I've never been so white-knuckled driving. It's completely different, and it's not like towing a regular lawnmower or a boat or something when you have a 13.5-foot structure behind you. It's like an airplane vertically just catching wind. And so everything from grunt work, things like that, from the ground up, it's a constant grind, and trying to manage time and what you want to accomplish is a real struggle.
The benefit is that you can't have a bourbon in the middle of the day, but we try not to in general.
Yes, not in the middle of the day.
Doesn't make for a productive day for those of you that are drinking bourbon right now, and if you own a business, you may want to cut back. So not to be insensitive, but yes, I am being insensitive. So you began promoting Try a Tiny at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, as you said. What's Indianapolis like for starting a business, and why did you choose Indianapolis?
Yes, and I did use the event to start promoting it. I wasn't able to partner with the Speedway until this last year. So I was just trying to use the influx of people that were coming to visit our town as a way to, hopefully get some lodging arrangements set up. But I think that Indianapolis, Indiana is a great place to start a business. I mentioned, I previously had moved away to Manhattan. Coming back here was kind of a no-brainer in the sense that it's super business friendly. Cost of living is fantastic. There are tons of resources, co-working spaces, and organizations that are trying to help, startups, tech companies, female entrepreneurs. So I feel, if someone is considering it, you certainly have the resources available to support that initiative.
And not to mention parking, right?
And parking.
Parking is like people always complaining to me, oh, parking is so bad. I'm like, you have never lived a place where it's really bad.
Or traffic.
Traffic.
No, just because there are other vehicles does not constitute traffic.
And good food, I might add.
Yes,
Yeah, really good food. That we've interviewed some of those people. There's some titans in the food scene here, and ethnic food is available too. So that's, I think, a really good thing about Indianapolis. So I wanted to ask you. So with tiny homes, in your opinion, can and are tiny homes used to combat social problems? Whether it's homelessness or temporary disaster-related situations?
Sure. I think, tiny homes often are just considered a different way of a foundation home, but that's the benefit, and since they're mostly on wheels, that mobility factor can offer a whole other set of uses for them. So exactly when there's a catastrophe event and FEMA brings in, help and aid, whether it's for the victims themselves or the people that are trying to help, bringing in extra lodging. This is just now another product that can be added to other, campers, RVs, whatever might otherwise be being brought to that area. In Detroit, they're actually using a model to help underprivileged citizens. There are homeless vet scenarios. In fact, it's been used for things completely, away from lodging. So my first tiny house ended up being sold to another Indianapolis-based entrepreneur who is converting that into a mobile nail salon.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so it kind of taking the food truck concept, because that's also a trailer that is a business that is being operated out of that. People, whether it's massage parlors or art studios. They call them granny pads.
A boutique bourbon bar?
Maybe that's the next step for
Try
It Tiny.
I mean, there are those times where you just don't want to leave home to get your nails done.
It's true. It's true.
And where do you see the tiny home movement going?
Well, it's interesting because the tiny home concept or alternative living has been around forever, really, if you think about teepees or yurts or all these other products that have provided lodging arrangements for folks. I think that whether the structure itself may change, may evolve, but I think that the movement and what it stands for is here to stay. I think that the younger generations, mine included, have started to grow away from more is more. And larger homes and more stuff. I think that they've trended more towards having different experiences, traveling, and relationships. And I think that trend is going to continue.
And experiences, as you said earlier, yeah. That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you to Maggie for coming here, what she does for people in this movement and for Indianapolis. I'm just so excited to have had you here. Are there any things you want to leave people with? Where can they find you?
They can look us up. It's tryittiny.com, or follow us on social media, and we'd be happy to help you find your first or second or third tiny house experience.
And just as a last word, they may be coming to some country and western concerts near you too.
It's true.
Hey, keep an eye out. Thank you for watching.